right, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome everyone in attendance. The committee has under consideration the estimates of the Ministry of Public Safety and Emergency Services for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025. I'd ask that we go around the table and introduce ourselves. Minister, when we come to you, if you would kindly introduce the officials with you on the left and right side of you, that would be great. And we'll start to my right, Mr. Lunty.
Good morning, everyone. Brandon Lunty, MLA for Leduc Beaumont.
Chelsea Petrovic, MLA for Livingston McLeod.
Martin Long, the MLA for West Yellowhead.
Good morning, everyone. Peter Singh, MLA Calgary East.
Good morning, Jennifer Johnson, Lacombe Pinoca. To my right is Becky Rees, my assistant.
Great. I'm Mike Ellis, Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services, and we'll go left to right. First, I have Brad Smith, Assistant Deputy Minister of Financial Services and Senior Financial Officer. Ms. Rayanne Lajeunesse, Deputy Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services. I have Mr. Stephen Lacroix, Assistant Deputy Minister of Alberta Emergency Management Agency. And last but not least, Mr. Curtis Zablocki, Assistant Deputy Minister, Public Security Division. And that's it. Thank you.
MLA Rhiannon Hoyle for Edmonton South.
Irfan Sabir, MLA Calgary Buller McCall.
Member Janet Aramenko for Calgary Curry.
Good morning, I'm Dave Egan, MLA for Edmonton Northwest.
And we'll head over to the...
Andrew Brachenko, MLA for Drayton Valley, Devon.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm Jackie Lovely, MLA for the Camrose constituency and Chair for the committee. So just a few housekeeping notes here. Honorable Mr. Egan is substituting for Ms. Goring. Please note that the microphones are operated by Hansard staff. Committee proceedings are live streamed on the internet and broadcast on Alberta Assembly TV. The audio-visual stream and transcripts of meeting can be accessed via the Legislative Assembly website. Members participating remotely, we don't have any today, but if we do have someone joining, you're encouraged to turn on your camera. Please set your cell phones and other devices to silent for the duration of the meeting. Honourable members, the main estimates for the Ministry of Public Safety and Emergency Services shall be considered for 3 hours. Standing Order 59.01 sets out the process for consideration of the main estimates in the Legislative Policies Committee. Suborder 59.016 sets out the speaking rotation for this meeting. The speaking rotation chart is available on the committee's internal website, and hard copies have been provided to the ministry officials at the table. For each segment of the meeting, blocks of speaking time will be combined only if both the minister and members speaking agree. If debate is exhausted prior to 3 hours, the ministry's estimates are deemed to have been considered for the time allotted in the main estimate schedule, and committee will be adjourned. Should members have any questions regarding speaking times or rotation, please email or message the clerk about the process. With the concurrence of the committee, I will call a 5-minute break near the midpoint of the meeting. However, the 3-hour clock will continue to run. Does anyone oppose having a break? All right, we'll have a break then. Ministry officials who are present may, at the direction of the minister, address the committee. Ministry officials sitting in the gallery, if called upon, have access to the microphone in the gallery area and are asked to please introduce themselves for the record prior to speaking. Pages are available to deliver notes or other material between the gallery and the table. Attendees in the gallery may not approach the table. Space permitting, opposition caucus staff may sit at the table to assist their members. However, members have priority to sit at the table at all times. Points of order will be dealt with as they arrive, and individual speaking times will be paused. However, the block of speaking time and the overall 3-hour meeting clock will continue to run. Any written material provided in response to questions raised during the main estimate should be tabled by the minister in the Assembly for the benefit of all members. Finally, the committee should have the opportunity to hear both the questions and the answers without interruption during estimates debate. Debate flows through the chair, please everyone, at all times, including instances when speaking time is shared between the member and the minister. I now invite the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services to begin with your opening remarks, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good day, everyone, and thank you all for being here. I want to first begin by acknowledging that we are today gathered on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional gathering place of many diverse First Nations and Métis people. And today I will presenting the Public Safety and Emergency Services Business Plan and Estimates. I know I've already introduced my staff up front. I'm going to do it again, as well as a few other folks here. Of course, we have Ms. Rayanne Lajeunesse, Deputy Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services, Mr. Brad Smith, Assistant Deputy Minister of Financial Services and Senior Financial Officer, Mr. Curtis Zablocki, Assistant Deputy Minister of Public Safety Security Division, and of course, Mr. Stephen Lacroix, Assistant Deputy Minister of Alberta Emergency Management Agency. We have a few folks in the gallery, and I know I'm going to miss a couple, but I know we have a couple other Assistant Deputy Ministers, Ms. Fiona Lavoie, Assistant Deputy Minister of Correctional Services Division, Mr. Ross Nairn, Assistant Deputy Minister of Strategy Support and Integrated Initiatives Division. So public safety, as we all know, is the foundational to any thriving and prosperous society. Each one of us has a fundamental right to be safe in our communities. As a former Calgary Police Service officer, that commitment to ensuring public safety was my duty and certainly a priority for me each and every day. Now, as Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services, my focus has expanded, but that commitment is stronger than ever. When I received the mandate from the Premier last summer, it directed me to ensure that Alberta is a role model for safe and secure communities. Because government has a fundamental role to play in protecting Alberta from crime, violence, disasters, and any other unlawful and life-threatening risks to health and safety, Alberta has already has a strong foundation of safety and security mechanisms in place across the province. And over the past year, we've worked hard to strengthen this foundation with new tools and supports designed to make Alberta's communities safer, provide law enforcement with the tools they need to combat crime and violence, support victims of crime, and protect our communities from the impact of disasters such as floods and wildfires. Today, I'm pleased to present a budget that builds on the great work already being done by continuing to meet current needs while finding new ways to approach public safety in Alberta. Budget 24 is not just a financial plan, it is a responsible blueprint that lays the foundation for a safer Alberta over the next 3 years. To this end, Budget 24 includes an additional $22 million in funding dedicated to enhancing public safety measures across the province. That means that the consolidated budget for the ministry is $1.28 billion. We all know that crime and violence continues to be serious concerns for Albertans, and we're going to do everything in our power to drive down the trends of increasing violence. And that needs to start with a paradigm shift in Alberta's approach to policing. As I've said many times before, no longer will police be seen as an arm of the state, but rather an extension or reflection of the community that they serve. I envision an Alberta where every police officer reports on duty with the belief that they can be a leader for the public safety in their community. And on the other side of that spectrum, community members view the police as the community members and leaders, also within, of course, their community. We have a lot of work ahead of us to tackle some of these very complex and nuanced challenges that our communities are facing. But I know that by working together, we can drive forward meaningful change that will make our communities safer and life better for all Albertans. This includes all levels of government, healthcare providers, first responders, law enforcement, Indigenous partners, social service agencies, and community groups. On that note, this year's budget for the Public Security Division is about $764.9 million, and a key portion of this budget will go towards improving public safety through increased resources for law enforcement agencies and communities. Working with policing partners, the ministry is developing strategies to address urban crime rate, including adding patrol officers in Edmonton, Calgary, and other communities to assist policing partners with street-level law enforcement. Specifically, we're allocating $10 million in new funding to both Edmonton Police Service and the Calgary Police Service. We know that the most effective deterrent to crime is the visible presence of uniformed officers patrolling the streets. And this funding is aimed at hiring, training, and deploying 100 new officers to Police Corps Transit and identified high crime areas in each city. Furthermore, we're allocating an additional $20.9 million to the Provincial Police Service Agreement. Our historic investment in policing has added more than 500 civilian and officer positions at the RCMP detachments throughout rural Alberta since the new police funding model was implemented in 2020. So together, these investments mean more resources for law enforcement to help ensure the safety of Albertans no matter where they live. We're also going to tackle increasing rates of organized crime with an additional $10.6 million to address issues such as gang and gun violence and drug trafficking. This funding is part of Alberta's $53 million allocation through the Federal Gun and Gang Violence Action Fund. Over the next several years, this funding will support 31 initiatives that focus on prevention and enforcement, as well as engagement with municipalities, local law enforcement partners, and Alberta's law enforcement response teams. We're also working on several fronts to ensure law enforcement agencies and the justice system have the tools and expertise needed to prevent violent crime and gang members from targeting communities, while also continuing to work with our colleagues in the Ministry of Justice on a strategy to detain and prosecute violent criminals and gang members. While preventing crime is a priority, there are some who will unfortunately find themselves in the corrections system. Our goal is to support corrections in a way that promotes public safety while also reducing recidivism through supports to offenders. Budget 2024 provides a total operating budget of $350 million for Corrections Services Division. This funding guarantees Alberta's hardworking correctional staff can continue to be on the front line every day, working for the safety and security of Albertans and for those they oversee. We're also moving forward with a modern ankle bracelet monitoring program to provide closer supervision of certain bail and community sentenced individuals who require monitoring in the community. $3 million in new capital funding is being provided to establish dedicated space for a 24-hour electronic monitoring ankle bracelet program. While there are some public safety challenges we can predict, it's not as easy to predict the ways that we will be tested, of course, by Mother Nature. Floods, wildfires, tornadoes, and other emergencies can strike, of course, at any time. The scope and scale of complexity of 2023 season was unprecedented, and all indicators point to the intense wildfire season possibly this year, and we must be ready. Through Budget 2024, the Alberta Emergency Management Agency will receive an additional $3.1 million in funding for a total budget of $108 million. This additional funding will provide the staff needed to sustain 24/7 access to provincial emergency management support. It will also deliver evidence information emergency management training, the preparation of implementation of emergency and business continuity plans, training and program supports for emergency and social service planning and processes, and incident management support during response to widespread emergencies and disasters. Ultimately, it's an investment in making sure that we can support Alberta's municipalities, Métis settlements, First Nations, emergency events which occur in their communities. This collaboration ensures the province is prepared for resilient to the impacts of disasters. Today, I've outlined some of the details for how this year's budget will move us even closer to ensuring Alberta is a role model for safe and secure communities. We've made a lot of progress over the past year on the mandate, and we know that there's a lot more work that needs to be done. Budget 2024 supports us in continuing that work. Through the responsible targeting investments and strategic initiatives, we're working tirelessly to build safer communities so that all Albertans can feel secure in their homes, work, and out in their communities. That means finding a new approach where communities are able to find solutions to their unique public safety concerns, with government standing beside them as a partner in those efforts. And we're continuing to forge new paths in public safety and emergency services in this province. And Budget 24 continues to move us forward. So thank you, Madam Chair, and happy to take questions.
Well, thank you, Mister. We'll now begin the question and answer portion of the meeting. For the first 60 minutes, members of the official opposition and the minister may speak. However, members, you will be able to see the timer for the speaker block, both in the committee room and on Microsoft Teams. Questions? Okay, so member, would you like to combine your time? Who's speaking first? Combine? And minister, what's your choice? Combine?
Yeah,
Okay.
You're talking about back and forth, right?
Back and forth,
that's fine.
yes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, well, let's proceed.
And thank you, Chair, and pleasure to be here to discuss public safety and emergency service estimates. Thank you, Minister, for being here, and thank you for agreeing to go back and forth. That's more effective. And also thank you for your staff for being here and the work you do. I will go through questions for different documents. I will start with business plan. Most of these questions are pretty basic just to get a better understanding of these estimates. Through Chair, my first question relates to business plans. Business plan, page 115. Working alongside other ministries, law enforcement, and other community and indigenous partners, the ministry is part of Justice and Public Safety Continuum and supports the unique needs of Albertan while ensuring the sustainability and resilience of the system. In your opening remarks, Minister, you also mentioned that all of us have a fundamental right to be safe, and the goal of the ministry is to be a role model for safe and secure communities. However, in business plan, it's mentioned that violent crime has gone up both in rural and urban centers, and there is a lot of talk about recovery, but fact remains that there are 6 Albertans dying every single day from drugs, illicit drugs, in our communities. And there are concerns about lack of consultation with indigenous communities, community partners on programs such as victim of crime services. So through the chair, the ministry is failing to meet the basic safety needs of Albertans and its mandate to keep Albertans safe in their communities.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank the member. I thank the member for being here. Okay, look, if you want to go down this road, member, we're happy to go down this road. Bill C-75 has created an environment that has allowed organized crime to thrive. It is a catch and release program that has made not just Albertans less safe, it has made Canadians less safe. That is the consensus of every province. We are doing our best to try to keep Albertans safe. This is why you are seeing investments that are, I would argue, unprecedented in law enforcement all throughout this province. This is why you brought up our First Nations friends. You are seeing investments in First Nations that don't necessarily, yes?
If you could kindly direct your conversation through the chair, that would be so much appreciated. Thank you.
Sorry, I have bad eyes. I'm not even looking at him, but I can barely see you, Madam Chair. So anyway, but thank you so much. We talk about, this is slightly out of the scope, but if you're the one that raised it when it comes to the opioid crisis that is currently going on. One of the things that I did under a previous ministry, but I'm happy to have this conversation. When I went to the blood reserve, it was not the heavy-handed government trying to tell Indigenous people what to do. It was me saying, what do you want and how can I help you? And this is where we had an unprecedented investment in a recovery community in the blood reserve, for which other Indigenous communities have asked that, and we are continuing with Siksika and Enoch and Sutina to help curb this. There is one completely failed policy, and that is what is known as so-called safe supply. That is something that does not exist. That was proven in the Safe Supply Committee that we had held in this particular building, quite frankly. And we will continue down that path of a recovery-oriented system of care. To the point where, and I think it's important for anybody listening to know this as well, the state of Oregon has actually reversed their policies. They've reversed their policies on defunding the police. They've reversed their policies on the way they were approaching the addictions crisis that they were facing in their area. They've actually criminalized drugs again in the state of Oregon. So we're proud of the work that we are doing. Of course, we don't want to see anybody die when it comes to opioids, but what we're talking about here is an unprecedented amount of drugs that are flowing into this province from the United States, that is flowing into this province from British Columbia, and we have to stop that particular flow. And we've invested an enormous amount of money into Alert as well. 55.7 million annually the government provides to Alert, which is joint operations between the RCMP and municipalities. We're trying to tackle this from a multitude of different fronts. But, Madam Chair, I can tell you, this is no heavy lift. But I will say this. There is a reason why that Alberta has received positive international recognition from Stanford University, from Harvard University, from Yale University, and it's because of the work we have done in this overwhelming crisis that we are facing all throughout North America right now.
Thank you, Minister, and through the chair. We will have more conversation about this recovery program within correctional facilities, but I will ask when I get there. But I do note that blood recovery community is yet to be built. So I will move on to same page. Ministry's business plan talks about the prevention and recovery from emergencies in the province. And given the important role your ministry plays in preparation for disaster, there are some serious drought and early wildfire warnings. Albertans are deeply concerned about it. So through the chair, can you please talk about specific initiatives that you're undertaking and how much money has been specifically set aside for those initiatives?
Sure. I mean, I'll get my Assistant Deputy Minister, Stephen Lacroix, to supplement here. But, I can tell you, Madam Chair, we actually work quite collaboratively with the federal government on this particular issue when it comes to emergency management. I know that I was recently in Ottawa at a federal provincial territorial meeting, and we discussed making sure that we have education and training for communities throughout the province. Because one thing I learned during the last wildfire season, quite frankly, even though I'm born and raised in Alberta, is just really truly how big Alberta is. From the top of the province to the bottom of the province, and making sure that we have resources that get there in a timely manner is important, and that's why what Alberta Emergency Management does when it comes to local education and training of municipalities, I think is something that is the consistency that we want to see throughout the province. And if you don't mind, if I can get to my Assistant Deputy Minister to supplement that, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Minister. So we are a part of let's call it a broader system. So Minister Ellis already touched on our connections with the federal government under the disaster financial assistance arrangements. This is a program that will, if approved, when approved, and it was approved for the events last summer, if we use that as an example, up to 90% of federal funding in the recovery of from disasters, again, if they're eligible. And eligibility is usually around or interpreted around uninsurable losses. So that's the federal government's role and their governance in that piece. And we fully anticipate actually the federal government to update those disaster financial assistance arrangements when they table their budget later in April. We've been part of the conversations that, of course, we're not privy to discuss yet, as it's yet to be made official, but that's something that's on the way, as well as a federal insurance relocation plan that is targeting at-risk flood areas. So that's Ottawa's role in all of this. Now, if we look at what the government of Alberta is doing and what the Alberta Emergency Management Agency does within public safety and emergency services, we oversee a very robust and resilient emergency management system that leverages the talent of local authorities. And to be quite blunt, if we had not built that system, we would not probably have, I hate to use the word survive, but not have fared as well, albeit there were some tragedies last summer, but no catastrophic losses. And the reasons behind that is a decentralized system that is enabled, financed, resourced by the provincial government through the Alberta Emergency Management Agency. Now, concrete actions that we're contemplating or that are being announced and are actually in the budget documents. So we're increasing when I say we is the Alberta government, Madam Chair, of course, through Treasury Board and Finance, the contingency fund available to pay for the response to those disasters. So that's $2 billion. So from 1.5 to $2 billion. So that makes more money available to cope with those disasters when they happen. Also, there's been some investments in the Alberta Emergency Management Agency. So you'll find in the documents that we've been privileged to see an uptick in spending in the agency of $3.1 million, as was mentioned by Minister Ellis, Madam Chair. That translates into 29 full-time equivalencies to better serve Albertans. Essentially, what the current construct forced me to do, essentially, is stop work on key strategic files to be able to respond to the disaster. And of course, as you know, more than I do, the wheels of government and governments, actually, keep turning. So this will be able to allow me to have folks that will be able to focus full-time on certain key strategic initiatives. I was talking about the federal government tabling new legislation, new arrangements, new granting programs to the province, so we'll be able to provide more oversight on that. Our Be Prepared team, so those are the folks that you would hear or see on social media informing, educating Albertans to be prepared, will be on there. More work as well on hazard identification and risk assessment, so disaster risk reduction. Improvements to the Alberta First Responders radio communication systems. Our logistics support in the Provincial Emergency Coordination Center will be improved. Our 911 oversights will be improved. Our granting agreements will also improve our field officer complement in Alberta. So without geeking out too much, we divided the province in 7 regions. Each of them have field officers. So we're increasing that. We're increasing as well our ability to liaise or communicate with industry to leverage their resources to respond to disasters. As you all know, Alberta is privileged to have some pretty big players in that sphere with a lot of equipment and resources. So we'll be able to do a better job of doing that. We're also doubling.
The chair, Minister, just a quick follow-up. So all the funds that have been set aside to deal with wildfires or disasters or recovery, they are in contingency and not directly in your budget right now.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's correct, Madam Chair. Essentially, there's monies that we sought expenditure authority for. I'll give you an example. For the floods last summer, $67.5 million off the top of my head, and $175 million for the wildfire disaster recovery programs. Those are drawn from the contingency. and then we administer those funds over the years it takes to get through the program. Correct.
Thank you. Through the chair, business plan also talks about correctional centers, youth correctional centers. So just pretty basic questions about what's the total inmate population in all these centers, and what's the total number of staff there, and are there any vacancies? And related question, there was also mentioned that there are rehabilitation opportunities that are available to inmates. Can Minister also talk about that and how much money you're spending specifically on rehabilitation initiatives?
Yeah, thank you very much. Excellent questions. I know the member would know this. I mean, the Youth Criminal Justice Act is certainly written in a way that really kids are not to be incarcerated. So we have our Assistant Deputy Minister here as well, so she can give you some exact numbers, but maybe it's wrong that I don't speculate, but the numbers I would say are low, and we'll get Fiona to come up and provide some averages on that. One of the things that we will be doing is working with mental health and addictions and I think a valid point that you're making, and a point that I made, quite frankly, when I was in opposition regarding the buildings themselves. And we're looking at creating what are known as youth centers of excellence in both Calgary and Edmonton. Although I think I'll get Fiona to expand on this, Fiona to expand on this as well. But I think there are some challenges, because I think that the facility in Calgary is a little bit more is being utilized a bit more than the facility in Edmonton. So maybe Fiona, would you mind just supplementing this, please? Thank you.
Good morning, Fiona Lavoie. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister for the Correctional Services Division. Just a point of clarification, is the question specific to only youth, Madam Chair, or is it about all individuals in custody, whether they're youth or adult?
It was all.
All, okay. So if it's okay with the Minister, I'll just speak generally about overall populations in custody at the moment. On average, we have about 3,400 people in custody on any given day, and that fluctuates from time to time. We have 10 facilities in the province that house those individuals. There's approximately about 3,000 staff members that support all Correctional Services Division operations. So that's inclusive of custody and community and supporting measures as well. Within our correctional centers, that's in and around 2,000 staff members that support those operations. And in terms of the rehabilitative components, certainly there are a number of rehabilitative interventions that occur within our facilities, if that's specific to custody. That's inclusive of educational opportunities that we have contracts with a number of providers, mostly post-secondary institutions, to support rehabilitative efforts in that space, as well as the Minister had spoken about earlier, about therapeutic living units that operate in 3, soon to be 4 facilities that support the recovery-oriented system of care model. And I can't recall if there were other questions within there, if that's okay, Minister.
Sorry, member, through the chair, would you mind? I can supplement a little bit more, if you don't mind. Thanks. And sorry, I apologize, Madam Chair. I thought the member was talking about youth. I didn't quite hear the adult component of that. But if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind expanding slightly a bit on the therapeutic living units. This was certainly identified by me several years ago. I have no desire to watch anyone suffer while in custody, especially if they're facing some sort of neurobiological illness, which is of course addiction. So having a place for them to start the healing process was something that was, I would say, near and dear to my heart. So we have currently 4 TLUs in adult centers. The first one was opened up in Red Deer And we do have one, I think, that is going to be opened up later this month. So we have Red Deer, Lethbridge, Fort Saskatchewan, and Calgary, right? Okay, so those, and the last one is, of course, going to be opened up later this month. But really, it's about having people that start a pathway and a journey to healing, as opposed to just releasing them from a correctional facility, giving them an LRT ticket, and then sending them into downtown where the cycle of abuse and recidivism continues. So I'll leave that there. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Through the chair, we will have more questions about these programs. My colleague will be asking that, but I will continue with my questions. Same page, page 115 of business plan also talks about policing agreements with RCMP and other specialized policing programs to tackle crime, domestic violence, and human trafficking. So the question I have is pretty basic. What's the total cost of these agreements to the province? And what's the cost that federal government provides as subsidy for these agreements? Through the chair to Minister.
Brad, do you have that number? Sure, go ahead.
Good morning, Brad Smith, Assistant Deputy Minister, Financial Services Division. Through the chair, the province's cost for the Provincial Police Services Agreement with the RCMP is $358 million. There's also cost-shared agreements with the federal government for policing services on First Nation communities, where Alberta pays 48% and the federal government pays 51%.
So just for clarification, 5149, not 48. Yeah,
5149.
Okay.
Sorry.
Small, but big.
Thank you. Thank you. So, follow-up question through the chair. Those 4852 or 4951, these are the First Nation, 22 First Nation who have standalone agreements, right?
So the microphone system is operated through Hansard, and so when you are going to speak, it'll automatically come on because we have our wizard back here taking care of everything for you.
Actually, Brad, hang on a second. Sorry. Madam Chair, if you don't mind, please. Okay, thank you. Sorry. Again, I can't even see you nodding your head, so I apologize. Yeah, I apologize. That's my issue. I apologize. So I think I understand where the member is going with this. So for example, if we use Siksika Nation, which is the first Indigenous community to go down the path of creating their own police service of we'll say independence in 14 years actually in Canada. So under the agreement that they would have had with the RCMP, and I stand to be corrected by Mr. Zablocki, it was a 70-30. Is that correct, sir? Right? Yes, it is, right? And then obviously they are wishing to have their own police service, and then that would be a 51-49 split with the country. Yeah.
Question that will bring in Bill 11 as well, that was introduced in the legislature yesterday. Madam Chair, this bill is clear that it's creating another police force, and what's not clear is that what will its mandate be and how that new force will work or fit in with existing police forces, because municipalities, Albertans, they have been pretty clear that they do not want another police force. And before the election, during the recent election, we didn't hear anything that province will be moving ahead towards creating a new police force. So the question through the chair is that who was consulted about it, who was asking for it, what will its mandate be, how it will work with others police forces that are existing in the province, what kind of money is set aside for that. And guess once we have answers to those, I can ask some other questions.
Well, I guess my first question back, Madam Chair, is this is certainly something that is before the legislature. It's not a line item budget, so like I would argue and question whether it's even in scope. Okay.
It's, if nothing has been set aside for it in the budget, that's fine, we can move on. Page 115 again talks about developing strategies to address urban crime rates and adds patrol officers in Edmonton and Calgary. Through the chair, Minister, there is a lot of talk, but fact remains that crime rates are going up for last 4 or 5 years, whatever the stats was included in the business plan, in urban center and rural communities. So clearly, whatever the government is doing, it's not working since the crime rate is going up. So question I have for the minister through the chair is, what you intend to do differently to bring that violent crime rates down in our communities?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to continue to advocate, along with many other colleagues right across this country, to have Bill C-75 repealed. So C-75 has made it virtually impossible to keep somebody in what is known as pretrial custody. So what happens is that you have somebody who has committed an offense. That person may be a violent repeat criminal offender. C-75 is releasing that individual onto the streets, or in the case of many places, even in rural Alberta as an example, people who are repeat criminal offenders when it comes to property crimes or thefts or whatever the case may be, those people are continuously being released into the streets. So, first of all, we can start at that basic level. Obviously, I have said on many occasions, officer presence matters. When people are getting randomly stabbed in the streets of Calgary and Edmonton, when people do not feel safe walking down the streets, when people can't even take an LRT for fear of something horrific happening to them, we have to ask ourselves, why is this happening and how can we stop this from happening? So number one is, look, I have no control over the federal government other than to continue to advocate for this. However, what I can do is help to support our local police services to ensure that we have an officer presence. And as I have said many times before, to police officers, do your job, right? If somebody is committing a crime, arrest them. If the person is released again and they commit another crime, arrest them again. And keep arresting them if they keep committing crime up until the point they stop committing crime, or quite frankly, they leave the province. But I don't want anybody to look at law enforcement in this province and sit there and say, yeah, but you guys aren't doing your job, because I know that they are. I have nothing but the utmost respect for every police officer in this province, the hard work that they do, and I get the frustration. I was on the street. I get the catch and release program that unfortunately has been plaguing our justice system. And so we have to make sure that we support our law enforcement, and that is one of the main things that we can do for that.
Thank you, Minister, and through the chair, I do have a lot of respect for the law enforcement and the work they do, but it's the law enforcement who is telling us that you cannot police your way out of this crime, whether it's urban or rural. What need to be done is that we need investment in housing, we need investment in mental health, we need investment in addiction, we need investment in social determinants of crime. So I will move on to page 115. Again, it talks about modernizing police standards and legislation to improve public trust. through the chair, question I have is, Minister, can you talk about these standards, how they were developed? Are they uniform across the province? And are they public? And what measures are you using to evaluate public trust in law enforcement?
So, thank you, member, through the chair, and I'll talk very broadly, and then I'll ask Mr. Slabwaki to supplement here. You know, one of the things I do talk about quite often is consistency, and you know, for me, ensuring that there are standards right throughout the province. So, essentially, you know, there should be no difference in the level of service that you get in Calgary than what you would get in the most northern part of Alberta or the most southern part of Alberta. So, you know, these are things that we're continuing to work on. I know that this type of consistency and predictability, I think, is part of something that helps to improve public trust and really stabilize a system all throughout this province. But if I can ask Mr. Slabwaki to supplement, please.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Madam Chair. Curtis Slabwaki with the Public Security Division. Just following up on the Minister's comments, public trust is really, I'll say, enhanced or emphasized with consistency in the application of law enforcement. It's important that across the province that consistency is present, is very relevant, and our branch continues to work on building consistency. We have a specific team dedicated to policing standards, followed up by regular and frequent audits of existing policing services. And I also add that any other police services that may be created within the province of Alberta would be subject to these high standards, these high benchmarks for police service delivery within Alberta. Thank you.
Thank you. And through the chair, moving on to page 117, outcome 1, that talks about Albertans are safe and secure in their communities. And it also talks about some focused work on hate-motivated crimes. So, a couple of questions through the chair. Minister, can you confirm if you're overseeing the hate crime coordination unit? And if so, what's the budget for it? What does its structure look like? And if you can talk briefly about the work they're doing. Second question is that there are many Albertans in Indigenous communities, person of color communities, and gender diverse communities who do not feel safe in their communities, and in particular, with the recent UCP transgender policy, many have shared those concerns that it may give rise to hate-motivated crime. So I would also...
Madam Chair, the point of order is under Standing Order 23B. The member speaks to the matters other than the question under discussion. I think, Madam Chair, the committee has convened for the purpose of considering the Ministry's 2024 budget, including estimates, fiscal plan, and business plan. The matter that has been raised by the member about the transgender is not within the scope boundaries of the said topics. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. And in fact, as we've been discussing up till this point for the last hour, each, different elements of security for Albertans, which is budgeted and paid for and supported by the budget of this current year. And so the hate crimes or different kinds of crime, whatever it happens to be, is under the umbrella of this current budget.
Thank you so much, members. I don't find this to be a point of order, so we'll get back to the discussion. So please proceed.
I think I've wrapped up my question that what impact, through the chair, Minister is seeing or likely to see of that policy on hate-motivated crimes.
Sure. I will Maybe we'll get Brad to supplement on the money and the budget component of it. But look, the Hate Crimes Coordination Unit is I would say, vitally important. I know that many police services throughout Alberta, Calgary, I'm sure the RCMP as well, have a hate crimes coordination units embedded within their organizations. And then, of course, having that provincial component, is just a, kind of a secondary oversight, which I think is fantastic. I think more eyes, the better, to look at these complaints that essentially come in, to have them reviewed and then reviewed again, and to ensure that public has of course, a right to feel safe and secure. And I think that is really, regardless of where they learn, worship, or socialize. And I think that is extremely important. I think you touched on this, but I think if you didn't, I apologize, member. But one of the other things is we have that Alberta Securities Infrastructure Program, which I would say has been, enormously successful. You, through the chair, of course, you may recall. That we expanded the scope of that for faith-based communities, especially those who are Muslim and Jewish, in light of the circumstances that are going on overseas. And I'm proud to say that program is in place, that we've had members from both communities that have taken us up on that. And even, we talk about expanding scopes as an example. We've allowed our sheriffs to expand that scope, again, to be utilized as an officer presence or a deterrent for some of our faith-based communities, especially those who may feel unsafe. So, yeah, very, very, very impressed and proud of the work that we're doing. But maybe we can get Brad. Can you touch on the money component of it?
Thank you, Brad Smith, Assistant Deputy Minister of Financial Services, through the chair. So in the budget on the voted estimates, page 180 of the government estimates, in element 5.2, there is $5 million for a hate crime grant, and that is supplemented by approximately $500,000 for a hate crime coordinator. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you through the chair. I wasn't asking about that security infrastructure program, but I can tell you that it's a good program, and many faith-based organizations, they do appreciate that program. I do have question about that later on in my documents, but I do remember writing something that I will ask about how much the total grant is and what's the uptake like, how many grants have been so far handed out.
$2.5 million. Is that the?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Through the chair, I thought last time it was 5 million, but I will move on to next question.
Oh, sorry. It's just. Sorry. Do you mind? Can I just supplement that? Yeah, I apologize. Again, my problem. I can't really see. It has dispensed 253 individual grants, totaling more than 2.5 million. So the total is not 2.5 million. That's just what's been dispensed so far.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Budget's fine.
Through the chair, so it's 1.5 of your outcome. Of your key objectives, outcome 1. It talks about ankle bracelet electronic monitoring program. So questions are pretty basic to the chair, that who you have consulted with on this program, what other jurisdictions are using it successfully, or what the evaluation is, where you will be procuring those bracelets from, how many, and what will be the total cost of the programs to Albertans.
Sure. We'll get you the numbers here, because obviously this is a line item in the budget, the budget, and of course not wanting to presuppose any outcome of the House, but it's certainly something that we would be hoping to be able to put out there in the fall of this year. Almost every, don't have the exact number, but almost every province is utilizing some form of electronic monitoring right now. And I would say we were very much so part of, I would say, an outlier in this particular field. Look, I mean, I think of, to be honest with you, what really comes to mind is people who are victims, and which traditionally fall on women who are victims of domestic violence. Those are some of the most unpredictable things that a police officer can deal with on a regular basis, and kind of some of the most unpredictable and dangerous things that courts, quite frankly, have to deal with. And having a tool in the toolbox for the prosecutors, the defense, for the judges, is something that I think is extremely helpful. As I've indicated, the bail hearing system, I would argue, is still broken. We're seeing domestic victims that are clearly being released and re-victimizing their victims again and again, to point where in some cases some of these victims have been murdered. You ask me, and what the public asks me is, let's try and think outside the box. Let's try to do something different. We're aware that these programs exist in other jurisdictions. We know that they're being utilized. We know that they're being successful. So let's get this going, and let's try and establish this. And I think that's going to make it a real difference in the community, especially for violent repeat criminal offenders. And I would say, on another note, especially those victims who might be victims of domestic violence. But you want to do the numbers? Sure. Deputy Minister, do the numbers.
Thank you very much. So the funding for electronic monitoring was initially given some funding in last year's budget. So we have 2.8 million in this year's budget from last year to do the partial implementation starting later this fall. And then full funding for the initiative is in next year's budget of 5.3 million. In addition, this year we've received 3 million in capital to support the rollout of the program. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair. Initiative supporting key objective 1, 10 million has been allocated to support Edmonton and Calgary. The question I have is, what will this money be spent on? Is that money for hiring that 100 police officers? If so, how many have been hired so far? And the related question is that this initiative is focused on Calgary and Edmonton, while stats shows that violent crime and property crime are increasing in rural areas as well. So what's specifically done to address that one?
Sure. I will get Mr. Zablocki here to supplement a little bit on if he has some of the exact numbers. But I think you hit the nail on the head. This is money that is going towards the recruiting and hiring, and of course the deployment of these officers on the streets of Calgary and Edmonton. Again, visible presence matters. This is a commitment that this government made. As I have said in the House, quite frankly, before, I don't do the hiring, I don't do the recruiting, and I certainly don't do the training. But I can tell you that we are in constant communication with both Edmonton and Calgary. They tell me that not only work is on the way, but there are members that they can say are deployed on the streets that they directly attribute to the funding that we provided. And sorry, Curtis, do you have anything you can supplement on that?
What I would like to add is both Edmonton and Calgary Police Services aim to have 25 of those police officers on the ground in the first year of this initiative.
And Sure, thank you. And you talked about rural. I mean, this is why, there's an additional $20.9 million being given, I believe, to the RCMP for the police service agreement. My apologies, the police service agreement to again help ensure that folks in rural Alberta are being protected. And as I have expanded also the scope of the sheriffs, allowing them to back up RCMP on calls for service currently. Again, Alberta is extremely big. Many of our officers right now are doing the best that they can. And as I've stated before, I do not care what the uniform is. When somebody calls 911, I expect somebody to show up to the call. And if there's a sheriff that is 2 minutes away from a call, I am very certain that when you are facing a crisis, especially if somebody, God forbid, was breaking into your house, knowing that a sheriff was 2 minutes away and could have done something, I'm not entirely sure how you can explain to somebody, spending 20 minutes explain how they don't have the power and authority to do that. And so that to me is completely unacceptable. So we are just trying to supplement and augment the support of the RCMP right now. Go ahead, Curtis.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, augmenting the RCMP, I would say over the last 4 years has been under the police funding model. So a great initiative that started in 2020 and has ran up to this year inclusive, and has added over 500 staff and almost 300 fully trained police officers to rural Alberta. A number of civilian staff as well too is obviously necessary to support those frontline policing efforts. And the focus, I can add, has been on rural Alberta in the context of enhancing visibility, for example, as well as reducing response times.
The chair. Minister, I do understand that you don't do hiring. All I'm looking for is that how many of those officers have already been hired. And I got some answer that 25 each in the first year. So did I get it right that they are yet to be hired, and by end of this year there will be 25 each in Calgary and Edmonton?
I don't think we're aware of exactly where each service is with their exact numbers, but that, yes, sir, that's the goal, to have 25 in each agency by the end of the first year.
Thank you, and through the chair, follow-up question. That sure, augmenting it with sheriff may work in certain circumstances, but some people have raised concerns about the level of their training in comparison to other professional forces, and that may not work in many cases. And second, that it may put their lives at risk if they are not trained to do something that other forces are trained to do. So question is in relation to their effectiveness and their safety.
Well, I'll get Curtis to supplement this, but look, I mean, I'm not. Maybe I can't speak to because I don't want to speculate. But they, as far as the highway patrol for the sheriffs, no different than our fish and wildlife officers. They're the closest thing from a peace officer perspective to being a police officer. They are trained in use of force. That's why they have use of force weapons, right? So, I would caution anybody to say that they may not be trained to a certain level, because I would say that they wouldn't be allowed to carry a handgun. They wouldn't be allowed to have any other use of force weapons if they were not trained. They do not have the full scope and powers of the criminal code the way a police officer would have. However, what we're talking about here is exigent circumstances. As I've indicated before, in exigent circumstances, where somebody's life might be at risk, or somebody is fearing for their life, or we have a situation which is a catastrophic incident that might be occurring on a highway, as an example, I would say it would be completely negligent to have that officer stand by or not attend or anything, at least to assist the RCMP. As I've stated before, the RCMP would still become the primary on that call, and I can get into details in police operations, what primary, secondary, and all that sort of stuff means. However, I can tell you, when somebody's having their house broken into, they want somebody to show up. They're not going to be waiting a half hour, hour and a half because of the geographical size of this province and where an officer happens to be sitting at a particular time. If somebody's close by, I'm trying to get somebody there, and that's what we're trying to do. Again, we're trying to augment and support the RCMP and support the work that they're doing. Do you want to supplement that, Curtis?
If I could, please, Madam Chair, I would just add that, to the point of the question, that training is absolutely critical for police officers and peace officers. And we absolutely ensure that as duties and functions are assigned, that training is commensurate with the activities and the functions that we're asking those individuals to complete. And I'll give you an example. The Rural Alberta Provincial Integrated Defence Response, or RAPID, I think is a good example of how the government has enhanced the training of certain sheriffs, starting with Fish and Wildlife, moving to the Sheriff's Highway Patrol as well, to enable them to assist and support the police of jurisdiction, most often the RCMP in rural Alberta, and augment and support them as they go about their duties. But we did absolutely ensure that we provided this additional training to the sheriffs and to the Fish and Wildlife officers so that they could do that function safely for themselves and safely for the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, outcome 2, Albertans are supported in their interactions with justice system, and it talks about recovery-oriented system of care, and also talks about programs to stop drugs from entering in the province. So question I have is specific to that program, that what specific action this ministry is taking to stop drugs, illegal guns, and those things from entering into the province.
Yeah, I mean, I know Curtis is intimately familiar with this, so I'll get him to supplement, but certainly from a very high level, certainly we have supports for Alberta Law Enforcement Response Team, which include, of course, members from all police agencies, so, everything from the RCMP to Edmonton, Calgary, Canberra. It doesn't matter what the police service is, and actually sheriffs. I think we have them embedded into our Alberta Law Enforcement Response Teams. And to your point, member, yes, we have significant concerns that drugs, guns, human trafficking are coming across the border from the United States. Certainly, Alert has been given the not just the funding, but certainly the ability to deal with that, work with the Canadian Border Service agencies. I know it's extremely important, obviously, the RCMP being a federal police service, and the ability to build those relationships with friends in the United States to help us provide information and intelligence on what sort of things are at least attempting to be smuggled across the border. Curtis, I don't know if you can supplement more on what Alert is doing.
Yeah, Minister, and I might just shift it to speak about some of the plans that we have in place within the Sheriff's Branch, maybe more specifically in the context. We are planning to create, through our Sheriff Highway Patrol, specific interdiction teams, Madam Chair, and this unit is targeted to receive funding of approximately $2.9 million beginning in the 25-26 fiscal year to create these teams, plus additional ongoing funding per year after that. Guns and gangs entering the province, it is front of mind for us. And as the minister indicated, ALERT plays a very significant role in working within the province, but they also work interprovincially as well, collaborating with other police services, because we know it doesn't all generate or start here within our province. I'll maybe stop there. Thank you.
Actually, do you mind if I supplement one thing, Chair? If the member's okay with it? Yeah, because you talked about interdiction teams. I think it's important to know that our sheriffs are commercial vehicle trained, and that is no easy course and no easy feat to be trained in. So what we're talking about commercial vehicle is the ability to not just stop a commercial vehicle, i.e. a semi that is carrying large goods, but the intelligence that, of course, we receive from ALERT as well as other policing agencies, both the United States across the country, is a lot of this illegal stuff, such as drugs, guns, and unfortunately human trafficking, are kind of coming across the border using commercial vehicles. So their training on this is unique. I can tell you, as a former law enforcement officer, I mean, asking for a driver's license, registration, or insurance on a commercial vehicle is really all I could do. So their unique training has been a huge asset, and I know that they're working very well with the RCMP as well as the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Team to help stop this illegal stuff from coming across our borders.
Thank you, Minister. We'll move on to outcome. Key objective 2.5, improve access to timely and efficient services and support for victims of crime and tragedy. I have 3 questions on this one. First, through the chair, your own documents say that it took 54 days to get these services to victim and survivor of crimes last year. And targets are not that great either. It's still, government is saying around 40-45 days. Question I have is, do you think that's the best the government can do to get the supports to victims of crimes?
So thank you, member, for the question, and of course, thank you, Chair. Look, I mean, this is why we're doing an overhaul of the victim services. I mean, what we're trying to find is, and I know the member would appreciate this, we're trying to get consistency throughout the province. We're trying to get predictable and sustainable funding throughout the province. He talked about the delay. There are some jurisdictions, and I can name them: Athabasca, Boyle, Drumheller, Hanna, Oyen, Bow Island, Foremost, Carson, Jasper, Masquachese, Redwater, Smoky Lake, Sylvan Lake, Wabaska, and Crow's Nest Pass that had no victim services, right? So this is why, yes, are there things that we need to do to improve? 100%. And that is why we're doing a complete revamping of the system and making sure that we have consistency, predictable, sustainable funding, and that victim services is a top priority throughout the province.
Thank you. To the chair. Minister, the existing victim service community boards, they are against this new 4-zone top-heavy model, and they have criticized publicly those changes. They also complain about lack of consultation. Rural Municipality of Alberta has opposed these changes into 4 larger zones, and some of them have made argument that while the government is restructuring AHS to go back to local health authority boards and giving governance back to the local communities, then why double standards that you're dismantling those local victim service community boards, turning them into larger 4 zones, which doesn't guarantee that it will improve services, because local boards, local people were working there and they knew their communities the best. And MLA report, UCP MLA report also didn't find anything wrong with those boards. They even said that they're going above and beyond. So my question is, why fix something that's not broken?
Well, it is broken. I just explained to you that there are many jurisdictions that had zero victim services. Look, we're trying to alleviate pressure off of some of the people. I mean, there are victim services jurisdictions that were
And that's our time. Minister, thank you so much. That concludes the first portion of questions for the official opposition. We'll now move over to the independent member for 20 minutes. Member, would you like to combine your time with the minister?
Yes, please.
Minister, what's your preference?
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks.
All right, let's proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the minister. On page 115 of the ministerial business plan, Alberta sheriffs have been granted authority to investigate a wider range of offenses, including impaired driving, in an attempt to reduce police response times, deter crime, and reinforce property rights. What measurable outcomes have been noted so far with our sheriffs and the Alberta crime? And on a similar subject, in the 2024-25 government estimates, page 181, 2.1, the line item for Alberta sheriffs for 2023-24 is $2,695,000 and increases to $8,695,000 for 24-25. Can the minister explain this massive increase in the number?
Sure. Well, I'll talk about the impaired driving one first, and maybe I'll get Brad to supplement the increase in the numbers. But member, thank you very much for noting this. The granting of the additional powers to our sheriffs has alleviated a lot of pressure off of RCMP, especially in rural Alberta. I think the number is about 4,000 that they have done as far as impaired driving. So when you really think about that, if prior to giving them the authority to do an impaired driving, if and I used to be a certified breath technician for the province of Alberta, there is a very much a time importance when you're doing an impaired driving. So, in the case of a sheriff who had stopped somebody for impaired driving, I gotta find an RCMP officer to assist with that, and that may or may not happen. If it didn't happen, then unfortunately that person may get off with only an administrative penalty as opposed to the criminal offense for which they were stopped and possibly arrested for at that particular time. So the fact that we have been able to alleviate pressure off the RCMP, allowing them to take other calls to service, I think is just another step in the evolution of what the sheriffs have been doing to augment and support our RCMP friends. And sorry, Brad, can you touch a little bit on the numbers increase?
Yes, thank you, Minister. Brad Smith, Assistant Deputy Minister of Financial Services, through the chair. So on page 180, the voted estimates, the line 2.1 for sheriffs has increased over budget by 4.6 million. 2.7 million of that is for the Alberta Public Security Application Software. It's a suite of software that supports frontline sheriff operations, and general inflationary increases for sheriffs as well. And then you referenced page 181 on capital investment. There is an increase in the capital investment for the sheriffs for the expansion of their communication systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the minister and staff for that answer. And I'm glad to see that we're supporting our RTP, our police, and communication is important. I think we would all agree on that. On page 118 of the ministerial business plan, it refers to violent and property crime rates per 100,000 populations, and I believe my colleague has already referred to this. Being a rural MLA in a rural constituency, this is very important to me, and I notice rural violent crime is continually rising since 2018, yet rural property crime rate, with one exception in 2019, has continued to decrease. Can the minister explain these trends?
Yes. It really has to do with lack of accountability. I mean, really. So again, I continue to say this because this is what it boils down to. Again, when C-75 came into play, again, it made it virtually impossible to keep anybody in what is known as pretrial custody. The lack of accountability in the justice system. So when, as an offender, and I think this has been pointed out, whether it be here in Alberta, but right across Canada, there's usually a small section of the population that are committing these types of offenses, whether it be property offenses or violent offenses. And when they know that when they get arrested that they're going to be released, it emboldens them. And it emboldens them to say, okay, well, yeah, so what? It's going to inconvenience me. I'll get arrested, but I'll get out, and I will, maybe make another poor decision in light of the one that they had already made. So we are continuing to see this rise in violence, but again, because many of these offenders know that there are no consequences or little to no consequences for their actions. And as I have said before, especially when it pertains to organized crime, the federal NDP Liberal Alliance has created an environment that has allowed organized crime to thrive with little to no consequences. And we are seeing not just street level gangs, we are talking about the big organized crime that are coming, like cartels that are coming from other areas of the world that are setting up shop, knowing darn well if they got arrested, they'll be out. And this is why you are seeing the fentanyl explosion that is occurring right now. This is why you are seeing the preying upon. You saw this in Edmonton specifically, and I'll use this as an example. Many of the folks in Edmonton were being preyed upon by organized crime. That some of these encampments, as an example, were not only they were operated by organized crime. They were charging victims, I would say, or extremely vulnerable people for using water fountains, for walking past a bridge. I mean, it was essentially a form of extortion. So, yeah, I mean, this is the type of stuff that is setting up when there are no consequences for people's actions. So these are the policies that are, quite frankly, the NDP Liberal policies that have been over the past 8 years that have been, quite frankly, an abject failure, and I have been very public about this. We are less safe in Canada because of these policies, and I am doing what I can within the powers that I have to try to keep Albertans safe. But it is a struggle when you have a government, an NDP Liberal government, that is making policies that is making it virtually impossible to keep somebody in jail right now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the Minister. The City of Lacombe currently manages their own municipal police force, and the feedback I get from constituents is very positive. As the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services, are you responsible for overseeing municipal police forces? And if so, what budget line item would reflect the funding for this? How many municipal police forces exist now in Alberta? And can you explain their funding model? And on a value for dollar basis, how do RCMP, provincial sheriffs, and municipal police forces compare?
There's a lot in there. I'm going to have to reflect on my memory while my staff here go and try and get some of the answers for you. But look, we have some wonderful police services in Alberta. Well, they're all wonderful, to be honest with you. And Lacombe is no different. One of the things that we try to do is empower municipalities. Lacombe is obviously a long-established police service, like Camrose is a long-established police service. These are small communities, but regardless, we must respect the people within their communities to say, you know what, we're happy with our police service. And that is, quite frankly, the feedback that I've been getting throughout Alberta. I reject anybody who says that, all of Alberta wants to go down one particular path, because that is not true. I mean, we have a very diverse and wonderful population all throughout the province. And there are some folks that are completely happy with status quo, and that's totally fine. I respect that. It's not about a heavy-handed government. And then we have some folks that are looking for other options. And I can think of at least four Indigenous communities as an example that have indicated to us that they would like to move in a different direction other than the current policing model that they have. And for us, it's not about the heavy hand of government forcing something upon our First Nations people. We want to be able to empower them, listen to them, and respect their wishes. So that's precisely what we're doing in Siksika Nation. That's precisely what we're doing in Enoch. That's precisely what we're doing for the entirety of Treaty 8, is listening to them, respecting them, and trying to meet the needs of their communities. Regarding our Grand Prairie, the Grand Prairie. So Grand Prairie is another perfect example. So Grand Prairie, they indicated to the province that they would like to go in a different direction, and I think we gave them $9.8 million
For 2 years.
9.8 million over 2 years, which is a transitional grant. I can tell you that process is well underway. They are doing an outstanding job, but that was again listening to the people of Grand Prairie, listening to their leadership, and respecting them and the decision that they make. And that is something, maybe a difference that we do as opposed to what we'll say others will do. Curtis, do you have any specific numbers for the member?
I would add, through the chair, if I could, that there are 7 municipal police services here in the province of Alberta. So Lacombe, Camrose, Tabor, Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, and of course Edmonton and Calgary. And in due course, Grand Prairie will join that group. 3 Indigenous police services, so the Tsuut'ina First Nation Police Service, the Lakeshore Police Service, and the Blood Tribe Police Service. And just in relation to a question in the last session, the cost share between the province and the federal government is 48% provincial, 52% federal in the context of support for those First Nations services. And just in relation to the original question as well, I think as everybody knows and assumes, that the municipal services are supported primarily by their municipalities, but also provincially through grants and other mechanisms as well by the province. Thank you.
And ADM Brad Smith would like to supplement as well.
Thank you, Minister. Through the chair. So municipalities, we also issued $90 million of municipal police assistance grant. It's called the Police Support Grant. And that's in addition to the funding available for Indigenous and municipalities who wish to explore alternative policing models that the Minister has referred to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Chair, through you to the Minister. Urban and rural crime prevention can be quite different, as you know, and requires different approaches. Many rural constituents have formed rural crime watch groups. Next week, the Red Deer Lacombe Rural Crime Watch is having their AGM, which I plan to attend. Can the Minister explain how the Ministry is supporting rural crime watch groups and where that is reflected in the budget?
So the answer is yes. In fact, if going off of memory here, I know everybody's going to be looking feverishly for where it is in the budget line item. But look, in order to have a successful police service, regardless of where you are, it really is about public trust. And with that public trust, it's the engagement that you have. I'll look at you, Madam Chair, right? The engagement with the community, as an example, right? So when you have a community that trusts the police, then this is where you have as the member indicated, this positive engagement, the rural crime watch, because they want to support their law enforcement. They know how hard it is out there. They know that they're working as hard as they can and going call to call to call. They get that. They understand that. So they want to augment and support their communities. When you put division into a community, and that of a police service, then what happens is that's where you have this disconnect. This is where you have this confrontation between the public and the law enforcement community, and there's no greater example of that, and I don't want to pinpoint anybody specifically, but certain areas, we'll say within the United States, that you see. So this is why you see my overarching vision, where the police are not an arm of the state, but instead an extension and reflection of the communities that they serve. And so with that building of the relationship, yes, as a government, sure, we absolutely support, Rural Crime Watch. We support, those who are going to augment and support from a volunteer level or even from a small granting type level, the law enforcement. But we always have to be very careful that, helping from a observe and report perspective, and then there's to be a vigilant, right? Vigilantism, right? We have to be very careful of that, right? Because I've done rural town halls before myself, and a lot of times I get a lot of questions about use of force, which I think, for the record and for everybody is aware, use of force, especially in the criminal code, is very, very subjective. There's a few folks at this table, including myself, that are trained in use of force. So understanding when it is appropriate to use, we call it a verbal mechanism as opposed to a use of force weapon, all the way to lethal force. But you will never see a law enforcement officer advising anybody when to use a use of force, because quite frankly, the people aren't trained in it. So we will always sit there and say to you, call 911. However, I know that's not your question. Your question had to do with the supports, then the volunteers and the people that are the Rural Crime Watch type folks. So yes, the answer is yes, we do support them. And Curtis, do you have any line item on that? Oh, you do?
Sorry.
Okay, sorry, go ahead, Deputy.
Sure. So under line, page 180, element 5.2, there's a number of grants captured under there that support various associations, a Rural Crime Watch and the like, and the total is just over about $3.5 million.
I missed that. What was it?
Element 5.2 on page 1.
3.5 million?
Around, I think it's right around there, yeah. Thank you.
All right. In light of the time, I'll just go to the next question. I think this might take up the rest of the time. The therapeutic living units support the priority of recovery. And the government has made it clear this is a high priority. Can you explain more about the therapeutic living units and how recovery is happening there and where this can be found in Budget 2024?
Well, I'll go to Brad as far as where it's found in the budget. But look, and I think I said this already before, the therapeutic living units, I used to be a judicial interim release hearing officer, and when I used to deal with people that, had come in with a, acute form of addiction, whether it be alcohol or crack or whatever the case may be, and then I used to deal with them once they were sober and used to bring them in front of a justice of the peace. And what I observed is that when I was reading their charges, typically the response I was getting on a very consistent basis was one of, oh my goodness, I can't believe what I did. And there was enormous regret. And they knew at that particular moment that they needed help. Unfortunately, years and years ago, there really was not that help to be found. So, when I had the opportunity to be in a position where I could actually do something, this is where I put in place what is known as a virtual opioid dependency program, and we installed that in pretty much every police service in Alberta to get somebody on evidence-based medication right away. Right? If they so choose. I mean, it was obviously an option. They didn't have to take it. Now, for those people that eventually went on to remand and were detained in a correctional facility, as I've indicated before, the goal is not to just incarcerate somebody and then release them after, whatever that time period is, and then give them an LRT ticket and send them back on the streets and have the whole cycle repeat itself. Again, many people that are in there are going through the neurobiological illness, the struggles of addiction. And so they look for that assistance. So we've provided to them all the evidence-based medication that we can. So there's Suboxone, there's Sublocade as an example. And the unique thing about Sublocade, but let me get Suboxone. Suboxone is a bit of a tablet that goes on your tongue, and then it's dissolved. Sublocade is an injection, but it gives somebody what is about 30 days of relief. So when you think about it as an addict, if you can get 30 days of relief to kind of set your head straight in order to start to move on and think about things that are better for you, that's a good thing.
Minister, that concludes our time. We'll take our 5-minute break now. Thanks, everyone. All right, everyone, that concludes our 5-minute break. We'll now move to 20 minutes for the government caucus members. Please proceed, member. But let's check in. Minister, do you want to continue doing back and forth, or would you like block time?
Back and forth is
Back
fine.
and forth? Please proceed, member.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, thank you to the minister and his team for joining us this morning. Obviously, public safety is an issue at the top of everyone's minds. I know when I speak to my constituents, it's something that they're always concerned about. Of course, personal security and their property, but Leduc Beaumont is blessed, of course, to have the Nisku Business Park and the airport, and so we have a lot of businesses and a lot of small businesses as well. So our office will often take calls about what we can do to make sure that when they make investments, their life savings into their business, that we can keep that property safe for them, and that their employees, of course, are feeling safe and secure when they get to go into work. So obviously really important part of your mandate, and I appreciated the comments from my fellow members about rural crime. I grew up in rural Alberta, and I've also lived in both big cities in Alberta, so I certainly appreciate the differences, but also the importance of approaches for both rural and urban. So maybe I'd start there on a sort of a community level, and specifically what some future policing options would look like in specific communities. So I'm going to ask about objective 1.4 on page 117. And that references support municipalities and Indigenous communities interested in exploring different models of policing and public safety. And of course, a couple pages earlier than that, on page 115, it talks about how the ministry provides provincial policing through an agreement with the federal government that establishes the RCMP as the provincial police services, but also supports municipal policing through policing grants. So through the chair, of course, to the minister, can you tell us a little bit about the plan for the RCMP in Alberta, and also then how specific communities might be able to explore differing policing options? Thank you.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, member, for the question, and of course through the chair. We have established what are known as police transition study grants. I think $6 million over 2 years. I think we've had well over 20 municipalities that have applied for these grants. They are certainly slowly coming in, and really it's about empowering municipalities. And as I've said before, this is not about the heavy hand of government telling somebody what to do. It's about empowerment. I think it's been said in this room before, you who live in your community know your community the best. And so we want to work with municipalities all throughout Alberta. Despite what some might say, there are varying opinions on this all throughout Alberta. I have had many a municipality indicate to me part of this varying opinions, say they're happy with status quo. I've had some that are looking at combining grants to figure out some form of regional type of policing. I've had some indicate to me that they would like their own municipal police service, and of course everything in between. So rather than throwing we'll say a problem my way to sit there and say impose something on me, that's not what I want to do, that's not what I'm going to do. We've just asked for a completely independent study to be done in your community that we will pay for. The grant's about $30,000, and the independent study will determine what is best for your community. You come back to me with that, and we'll figure out how to work with you to best suit the needs of your community. And again, there's a lot of varying opinions on this. There's nothing of this is homogenous in any way whatsoever. So, yeah, I mean, we're happy to continue to work with municipalities, and we're happy to make sure that we're meeting their needs from a public safety perspective, and we're happy to work with them regardless of whatever their option might be.
Thank you through the chair to the minister for that answer. Certainly important that we allow our municipalities to consider what's best for them. So and again through the chair of course, I'd like to touch on something you spoke a little bit about earlier, and this is again on page 117. It's the $10 million investment that would support Edmonton and Calgary to assist their policing partners and street level law enforcement in high crime areas such as downtown cores and public transit. And I think this is extremely relevant piece of this business plan. Again, having lived in both Edmonton and Calgary, and now currently living in the capital region, it's been a concern of mine personally, someone who would often take the public transportation in Edmonton, to see that deteriorate to the point where I never really felt comfortable doing so. Your back is always up. You're always trying to scan for the social disorder that you would see on the public transportation, and I can only imagine. Well, I know that in Leduc Beaumont, people talk to me about that same issue all the time. I of course have family and friends in Edmonton and Calgary, as many of us do, and when they're looking to just go do their jobs, to take their kids to recreational opportunities, to enjoy their cities, it's disappointing that people can't feel like that's a safe option for them. So through the chair to the minister, could you maybe expand on how this funding will be allocated and what benefits it will bring for Albertans? And specifically, if you wouldn't mind, Minister, can you expand how this funding will be used to address transit concerns specifically? Thank you.
Well, thank you, member. Yeah, I mean, we didn't, we actually didn't wait for budget. We actually accelerated this program to provide both Edmonton and Calgary the funding for these officers. But look, policing itself is extremely complex. The justice system is extremely complex. So again, we are trying to tackle this from a multitude of different ways. It isn't necessarily what people think. It's not. Policing has evolved. Remember, so think about the overarching vision: not an arm of the state, but an extension and reflection of the community that we serve. And nothing was a greater example than that. Than the way that government came together in Edmonton, quite frankly, to dismantle these encampments. Some of the proponents and activists will say, we're saying that you're just arresting people and you're throwing them in jail. And I can tell you nothing could be further from the truth than that. In fact, the numbers that I got from Minister Nixon was in the realm of about 70-ish percent of the people that basically, once the police went in there and said, hey, how can I help you? They actually took us up on the offer to get them into the triage center and get them on a path to wellness. And absolutely, there's members that talked about this earlier about housing. Housing is a component of that. There's no doubt. There's no doubt about that. But we also have to make sure that we're addressing people that have severe mental health and addictions issues. There are some people that are out there that have brain damage, as an example. And as I indicated earlier, many of these people are being preyed upon by organized crime. And so getting those folks out of there, and I think I was telling one of the other members the story about my time when I was in arrest processing, and when that person had that moment of, oh my goodness, what did I do? I need help. That's precisely what I anticipated, and that's precisely what actually happened on the streets of Edmonton, where those 70% of those people who took us up on the resources and were guided into the triage centers, when they knew that the organized gang member was not going to be there to influence them in any way. They had that moment where they're saying, yes, I don't want to live this life anymore. I want help, and please help me. And this is why we had the success that we had. And we utilized sheriffs in this particular to work with the Edmonton Police Service, to augment and support the Edmonton Police Service. We had sheriffs that were outside of some of the shelters here. Why? Is to stop the gang members from unduly influencing these people. So, I myself have just driving around, have seen a marked improvement. I have heard stories from the business communities in Edmonton. I have heard in a positive way saying we're noticing it better in Edmonton. I have heard people saying that, hey, I was trying to sell my house or my condo as an example, but I couldn't do it because anybody that would come and look in the neighborhood didn't want to buy in my neighborhood are now able to sell their real estate. So we're already seeing a marked improvement. And then, despite the detractors that want to say it's all about throwing people in jail, I was told by the Edmonton police chief that there was one arrest, and it was one arrest by somebody who had outstanding warrants. So regardless of whether that person was encountered in a tent or encountered on the street in a lawful way, that person had the outstanding warrants and would have been arrested anyway. So, but this is, you talked about transit as well. I mean, that the spillover to that is virtually, the same. We have to make sure that people feel safe, and feeling safe means walking down the street. And I've said this before as well, right? We all have rights, right? You have a right to walk down the street and not be stabbed. You have a right to walk down the street and not inhale secondhand crystal meth smoke. And quite frankly, many of these people that have severe mental health and addictions issues have a right not to be preyed upon by organized crime. So precisely that is what we're doing. We are going after the gang members and the organized crime members. We are doing what we can from a law enforcement perspective, working collaboratively with Minister Amory and Justice to, ask for detention when deemed necessary in law. And and we're proud of the success that we had in this. Yeah.
And through the chair, thank you for that information, Minister, and for all your hard work. I would like to cede my time to MLA Long.
Thank you, Member. Thank you, Chair, and through you, thank you to the Minister and his team. For me, I look at the signs of good leadership. Obviously, competency is a key component, but also a willingness to surround yourself with people who have different perspectives and listening to those perspectives. And that's something that I see from this minister in this portfolio, and I just really appreciate the sign of leadership that he has displayed. With that said, we've heard a lot of things already today, Chair, and I can appreciate the efforts that are being made, in particular around rural crime. I do echo the things that I've heard from the minister around the federal bail system, or is commonly called the catch and release system. In my communities, I don't find a lot of defund the police movement folks. I actually often reflect on some signs I've seen in downtown Edmonton, and I know that I've seen them at City Hall in Edmonton, the refund the police movement, where people are supportive of their officers and appreciate the efforts that are made to protect our community and integrate themselves into our communities. And yet, a lot of those efforts that our officers are putting forward are met with little recourse once these folks that are being arrested enter into the justice system. I have countless stories of people arrested 23 and 32 times, many of them on outstanding warrants, who are subsequently released with no financial requirement or little financial requirement, and then go back out and are arrested the same day again. Little deterrent on crime. And unfortunately, for us, it is a system that is largely left out of our hands, from my understanding. But I do want to acknowledge the police officers themselves and the efforts that they are making to keep our communities safe. With that said, rural crime rates do remain high, and communities are still left uneasy. And for me, I commend the ministry on focusing so much time and effort and understanding the issues in rural Alberta and attempting to tackle the issues head on. So on page 117, a key objective 1.2 of the business plan, which reinforces the commitment to focus work on rural crime. With that said, we've heard about 500 staff and over 300 police officers being added in rural Alberta. I'm also wondering how the funding will be used to specifically deter crime in rural areas beyond the visible presence of law enforcement. And then what obstacles is the ministry facing in encountering and addressing the rural crime? And with that, how are you working with municipalities specifically who are still lacking law enforcement personnel?
So thank you. As I've indicated, we are doing what we can to augment and support our friends in the RCMP. But please do not make, not that you're doing this, member, but please, people need to understand that the challenges that we are facing are not exclusive to Alberta. I have spoken to colleagues throughout this country, and I have been very public about this. I have said this, at town halls, at certain opportunities I've had with the media. The RCMP have been facing a significant challenge when it comes to human resources and hiring. That's not to say that they are not putting their best foot forward and trying to rectify this. And I certainly have assurances from the commissioner himself that is an absolute priority of his. But that doesn't take away the reality that is currently ongoing throughout Canada. And from Nova Scotia, and colleagues I've talked to in Nova Scotia, from colleagues that have contract policing all throughout Canada, they are facing considerable shortages in the amount of officers that they should have compared to what they do have, right? And that has been a challenge that BC and Saskatchewan and everybody else, Saskatchewan has gone and created their own marshal service at this time, marshal police service, again, to try and augment and support the RCMP. I'm going to pass it back to you, member, while I cough. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I'll change things up very quickly if that's okay. As people around the province are aware, my communities face significant challenges this past spring and summer with emergencies. Namely, I want to focus on the fire aspect of those emergencies, and we're aware that our province has been divided into two main areas for forestry, specifically the white zone and the green zone. I've been hearing from many constituents who, based on their experiences this past summer and specifically, are asking if the province and the Alberta Emergency Management Agency would consider basically when we're called in to face emergency, just saying, hey, it doesn't matter what zone this fire is starting in or coming from, that we have the expertise. We will take over this emergency. So I'm curious, on behalf of my constituents about that, and if that is something that your ministry has the budget to do and has the ability to do. And then also, what role can local folks contribute to helping out our emergency response efforts if we are limited in resources?
Well, we have 15 seconds. I mean, simple answer is, of course, we're supporting not only your municipality but other municipalities, and I think if we get to the next block of questions, I'll ask ADM Lacroix to supplement with a more fulsome answer.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes the government's block. Now we'll move to the second round of questions and responses. The speaking rotation going forward will be the same as the first round, starting with the official opposition, followed by the independent member, and then the government caucus. However, the speaking times are now reduced to 5 minutes for the duration of the meeting. We'll begin this rotation with a member of the official opposition who will have up to 5 minutes for questions and comments, followed by a response from the minister who may speak for up to 5 minutes. Both individuals have had an opportunity to speak. We will then move to the next caucus in rotation. If the member and minister agree to share time, we can proceed.
Minister's okay with it?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, strategic question is about strategic plan 2024-27, page 23. Talks about implementing the Alberta Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Girls Roadmap. So question I have is, Minister, that what specific role your ministry has in this project, if any, and can you talk briefly about it?
Yeah, great question. I know that Mr. Wilson, I think, will say more of a lead on this, but certainly, and maybe I'll get ADM Zablocki to supplement this from the policing perspective. But let me just say this: the missing, murdered Indigenous women's file is something that I would say is very near and dear to my heart. This is why we had enormous investment in human trafficking and creating the Center to Combat Human Trafficking. And if I can just maybe add an example of this, while we were, while the police service in Edmonton was taking down the tents, they found a woman who was on the missing, murdered Indigenous women's list for 5 years. And she was reunited with her family. So, I reject, anyone who says that, anyone who wants to or is choosing to stay in this life. This particular individual was being trafficked, being fed drugs. As I've indicated, organized crime was running rampant, and we are continuing to provide all supports that we can to Minister Wilson and our friends in Treaty 6, our friends in Treaty 7, our friends in Treaty 8, to do what we can in what I would say true reconciliation to help them out. Curtis, can you supplement that in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. Be happy to do that through the Madam Chair. I'll just speak briefly about the FILU, so the Family Information Liaison Unit, and those are critical points of contact for families that have missing persons within their family units, and these are positions that have been funded for a number of years now, and we continue to fund them. This is an initiative that receives up to 1.3 million on an annual base, and these roles, these positions, they do some critical things. They update the family on criminal investigations, court proceedings, if there's a fatality inquiry involved. They make connections to counseling and spiritual resources, and including elders and such, if that's what families wish and require. And their contacts with the police services as well too, which is important for updates on the status of investigations, the progress of investigations in regard to their family members and their loved ones. So a very critical function that we continue.
Next question is about strategic plans, page 20. It's about pre-charge assessment system. Where is that program at? And are there any concerns about independence of the police work, since they have to consult with and decide after talking to a Crown prosecutor?
I think pre-charge is justice, my friend.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll move on to public safety estimates. First line item, Minister, Deputy Minister, Corporate Services. Budget is going up from 8.6 to 10.4 million. What's the reason for this increase? What it will be spent on?
Brad Smith would like to answer that.
Thank you, Minister. Through the chair, Brad Smith, Assistant Deputy Minister of Financial Services. So the corporate services line on page 180, element 1.3, is increasing budget over budget by about $1.8 million. It's primarily just a transfer from justice with respect to changes to shared services when to reflect the previous Justice and Solicitor General Department and now the two departments. Thank you.
Thank you. Line 2.1, 2.2, they are also increasing slightly. If you can talk about the reason for those increases.
Again, we'll go to Brad Smith to answer that.
Yes, so 2.1 and 2.2, those are the sheriffs. We earlier spoke about that. Just bear with me. I will turn to that. So 2.1, Alberta Sheriffs is increasing 4.599 million budget over budget. 2.7 of that is for the Alberta Public Security application. It's a software suite for frontline operations for sheriffs. There is approximately $1.9 million in inflationary and salary increases in that line as well.
Thank you. And through the chair, line 2.3, Provincial Security Intelligence Office. Last time around, we did talk about rural surveillance program. Is this one something different, or that program still comes under this line item?
Okay, it's different.
Sure, thank you, through the chair, and we might ask ADM Zablocki to supplement, but the Provincial Security Intelligence Office is a centralized office that coordinates and assists with security intelligence across the province. The rural surveillance is a dedicated team being established in the sheriffs to support rural surveillance efforts in support of police.
And through the chair, that program still continues?
Yes.
And where is the line item for funding for that program?
Element 2.3.
Okay. Line 2.4, through the chair, law enforcement oversight. Last time around, the government came up with a piece of legislation that will create an oversight commission. What's the progress on that, and are the funds for that included in this line item?
So thank you very much. Obviously, building that program and having that independent agency, I think you would appreciate, member, is a bit of a heavy lift. But I will maybe ask my ADM, Ross Narn, are you able to supplement in the progress of the Independent Complaints Commission?
Ross Nairn, Assistant Deputy Minister for Strategy Supporting Integrated Initiatives. The Police Review Commission was a creation out of the Police Amendment Act in 2022. Work to implement is ongoing at this time. In budget element, budget element 2.4, the increase is linked to this staffing of the Alberta Police Review Commission.
Through the chair to the minister, I think I just want a little bit that where is that at? It's still in progress. Okay, thank you. I will move on to I will move on to line item 4, emergency management. I think generally speaking, I don't see money here, and my understanding is that will come from contingency.
Well, we did have an increase, and, we did have an increase, and I think the total budget is $108 million. Is that correct for you?
The increase is $3.1 million.
Right, but to a total of 108, if I remember correctly, yeah. So to just remember, I know where you're going with this, but I think it's important for you and everybody else to understand that it is very tough to predict a catastrophic event. And so obviously making sure the Alberta Emergency Management is prepared, absolutely. However, we do have a contingency fund, and, if there are exigent circumstances that require us to draw from that, that's why it's there.
I do understand that, but this time around, there are warnings about drought, there are warnings about fires. There are 54 or some wildfires going right now. So is government just playing with the numbers to show surplus and not providing money in the budget that should be there, because we are expecting that? So that was the reason I was asking that question.
Sure, simple answer is no.
Thank you so much. We'll move back over to the independent member.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the Minister. Again, the government has emphasized the importance of recovery in addictions. Our youth, our minors, are facing great mental health challenges as well as addictions, and this must be approached with great sensitivity. Rock Solid Refuge is a recovery center in Saskatchewan, serving youth aged 13 to 18. They work closely with families and support systems to ensure the safety, well-being, and recovery for these vulnerable youth. And indeed, the vast majority of these youth are recovering and going on to live successful lives. They have served many Albertan youth and currently have 2 Alberta youth at their center. Does Alberta have any centers like this for our minor youth that are focused on recovery, and where is this reflected in the budget?
Well, that's a question for obviously Minister Williams. I think the only thing I would just add to that of course youth mental health is extremely important, and I will just argue that there are many complexities, and I would almost argue misunderstandings about people that have complex mental health and addictions issues simultaneously, whether it be youth or adults. There are many people, I would say, that the lay person who thinks somebody might have a mental health concern, who actually might be having an acute reaction to crystal meth, as an example, which displays signs that somebody might have a mental health challenge, but don't necessarily mean that. So ensuring that we, of course, have the appropriate spaces regarding detox and treatment and recovery. Again, we are well underway. Again, not part of this ministry, but I would just argue that we are well underway in building a recovery-oriented system of care, which is, honestly, a bit of an envy for other areas in North America right now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the Minister, and apologize if this went into mental health and addictions a little too much. It comes out of the therapeutic living units, which are obviously for adults, and I'll come back to that. There are 87% of available therapeutic living unit spaces that have been utilized since the first unit opened in July 2023. It hasn't even been a year. This is on page 119 of your ministry business plan, page 19, 2B. So I'm curious, how many quantitatively does this mean? What numbers are reflected in the 87%? And has there been any data yet on how these individuals are doing today? Essentially, is this service effective?
We'll get Fiona to ADM to come and supplement here, but I will just say this from a very high level. What I have been hearing from people who have participated as clients in the therapeutic living units, from staff, at corrections who have been excited to be a part of trying to stop that recidivism, I would say has been very much a game changer, and there's nothing like it in the world, quite frankly, and to the point where it's becoming a bit of a beacon for other jurisdictions. But when you're talking about specific numbers, if I can ask Fiona to come in and see what she has for numbers.
Good morning, Fiona Lavoie, ADM for Correctional Services. Through the chair, there are 3 therapeutic living units that are currently operational. So Red Deer has currently 11 beds. Lethbridge has approximately 22 beds. And the Fort Saskatchewan Correctional Centre, which is female focused, has 48 beds. And so the intention is to operate those as full of capacity as we can. The final unit will be at the Calgary Correctional Centre, and the number of beds there is just being finalized. But in terms of the facilities that are operating at present, there is high uptake and participation. There is a process of application for individuals to participate. And as the minister indicated, it has been very positive to date. The program itself is designed for individuals that are in custody for at least 3 months in order for them to get the intensive treatment. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the minister and his team. My final question here is actually very cold because there's numbers here. What is included in your investment income and other revenue?
Investment income. Well, we're very service oriented and kind of human being. That's kind of our ministry here. I mean, it's like when people always look at police service budgets as an example. To be honest with you, most of it consists of people. You know, as far as revenues are concerned, I mean, let me just say this: is it civil forfeitures? Yeah. So one of the things I'll just say that we're looking at right now is actually civil forfeitures. Again, despite what some may think, I actually have some positive relationships with folks in the BC government, as an example. And so conversations I've had with Minister Farnsworth in British Columbia has been the success of civil forfeitures. I know that in Alberta was probably one of the first jurisdictions, if not the first jurisdiction, to do civil forfeitures. However, it has evolved throughout not just Canada, but also in the United Kingdom, and I think in Australia as well. So what does that really mean? Well, you know, as I've indicated before, there's been an environment that is being created by policies that has allowed organized crime to thrive with little to no consequences. And so how do I think outside the box and do something to constrict organized crime? And part of that is using civil forfeitures. So we are looking at expanding that. Is that in the budget?
We're doing that internally.
Okay, we're doing that internally. But we're looking at expanding that, really, and for all the lawyers in the room, it just provides a little bit more. We always want to get our lawyers employed, right? I was a bit of a joke, sorry, but it just provides a little bit more work for them, and really for organized crime. I mean, they're profiting off the backs of a lot of victims and people who are suffering right now. As I've said in committees like this in the past, the fentanyl itself, a $20,000 investment, can net you $5 million cash, and that is why you're seeing the prevalence of organized crime all throughout Alberta and quite frankly Canada, and this is why you're seeing cartels coming here. So in order for me to think outside of the box, I have to use mechanisms that we have under civil forfeiture to try and go after and essentially use that mechanism to try and constrict organized crime. So none of it is easy. We're trying to think outside of the box given the environment that we're in right now, and this is why we're continuing to support our police. This is why we're continuing to support organizations, as you mentioned, rural crime organizations. This is why we're trying to go after organized crime. This is why we're trying to invest a lot, quite frankly, in recovery, because if we can try and, again, take clients away from organized crime, again, that further constricts them. This is why we're trying to supplement and support drugs and guns and human trafficking that is coming across the border. This is why we have a concern about some of the policies. Again, I do have a good relationship with my friends in British Columbia, but I don't 100% agree on some policies. I don't agree on the decriminalization that they have done in British Columbia. I do have some concerns of diversion and some of these drugs that are coming across the border from British Columbia that are impacting in a negative way people in rural Alberta, people on the streets of Calgary and Edmonton. And, more drugs, I would argue, is not the answer to this very, very complex problem that is affecting not just Alberta, but quite frankly, all of North America. And it's really a societal issue that we're trying to address. I will say this, certainly as my time as the minister in that particular portfolio, we had success, which is probably why we had the international recognition that we have had. But I can tell you those types of policies are that I have seen, there have seen bad policies and I've seen good.
Thank you so much. We'll move now over to the government side.
Thank you, Chair. And to the Minister. I, being from Livingston-Macleod, obviously the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Team is near and dear to my heart, with us bordering on the US border, along with the BC border. We have two major intersections there as well, and then just south of a major city center. So I'm happy to see that your ministry is focusing on combating internet child exploitation, organized crime, human trafficking, auto theft, et cetera, et cetera. I see on page 180 of the estimates document that there is an increase of nearly 10.7 million to line item 2.8 for organized and serious crime. This is an important increase to this item. This is an important increase as this item supports the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Team, or ALERT, which has worked to build safer communities in our province since its establishment in 2006 by addressing various types of crime, such as organized crime, child pornography, gun violence, drug trafficking, and prolific offenders. I'm hoping that you can expand on the reasoning for the increase of funding and expand on how ALERT operates to address these areas of crime and find justice for the victims. And I also see that this funding supports the Gun and Gang Violence Action Fund. And can you speak more about this fund and how this additional funding in budget 2024-2025 will enhance efforts to combat gun and gang violence?
Great questions. Organized crime's continuing to thrive, again, with little to no consequences, so we're having to do whatever we can. This is why we've had this investment in ALERT, and certainly we've had, and I would say this about ALERT too, because not every jurisdiction has this type of response, given the geographical size of Alberta. So to have a coordinated effort between our federal friends, along with police agencies, because communication is really part of a successful operation, and certainly the increase in funding for organized crime, to combat organized crime, should I say. The 10.6 million of Alberta's 53 million allocation is through the Federal Gun and Gang Violent Action Fund. So again, this is working collaboratively with the province to support our ALERT team. But just remember, these guys, these folks that are in ALERT, they're the front lines, right? They're the ones that are building the relationships with the federal government in the United States, as an example, the DEA, the FBI, we're trying to combat this from every single direction. And then, of course, you touched a little bit about the child exploitation. And yeah, I mean, that is something, certainly we have that part of it when it comes to alert. I can tell you, I've been to that center. These officers there, full credit to them. They are working hard. It is not easy. It is an absolute wave that is coming towards them, but we are making sure that they are properly funded. We are making sure that they have all the resources to combat this. And again, it's all about their relationships, because many of these crimes, not all, but many of these crimes are occurring outside of Canada, although there are issues within Alberta and right across the country. But none of this is easy. Everything here is complex. I am going to ask ADM Sabwaki if he could just supplement on a more detailed level, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Minister, and through the chair. I just add in the context of alert and let's say more broadly as well too, the recent Guns and Gangs Violence Action Fund. And so we were just successful in securing $53 million over 5 years to move over 31 provincial initiatives forward through that respective funding. So that's going to include, I'd say more broadly, everything from prevention, education, enforcement, and such, working, building programs to get folks out of gang life, gang activity as well too. So it's a very comprehensive approach. It fits very nicely with our current Alberta law enforcement response and the subsequent teams, of which in the last couple of years we've really increased the resources within that particular program. Again, with Alert, and that's not just focused on Edmonton and Calgary, let's say. We have Alert regional teams. There are 6 regional teams across the province that support and provide prevention, again, education, and enforcement to rural and smaller communities across Alberta.
Thank you, Chair, and to you through the Minister for that answer. Minister, human trafficking is obviously a terrible and unthinkable crime that violates a person's most basic human rights and robs them of their safety and freedom. So I get emotional on this. I used to volunteer my time for a program, and we actually helped bring children out of sex trafficking as well. So it's difficult to see that this is happening here in Alberta. Human traffickers, they prey on our vulnerable people. And it's our duty as a government to protect the vulnerable communities and all Albertans from this crime. By stopping traffickers and supporting survivors, we can work towards eliminating human trafficking in our communities. So I see on page 117 of the ministry's business plan an investment of $8.2 million to combat human trafficking, and this includes the establishment of the Alberta Office to Combat Trafficking in Persons, which is supported under line 5.2 of the budget estimates, page 179. Minister, would you be able to talk in more detail about the mandate of this office and how will this funding be used to combat human trafficking, as well as what it supports it will bring to the victims and survivors of this terrible crime?
So, thank you, member, and obviously through the chair. You're right. Human trafficking is an absolutely despicable crime. It robs people, primarily women, of their dignity, their self-respect, and it's something that we were proud to put an enormous investment in. This was a 4-year commitment of about $22.8 million. Started in 2022 to fight human trafficking and protect vulnerable people and support survivors. I would say one of the unique things about this Center to Combat Human Trafficking that is, again, currently being built, we've certainly had our first selection of the 2 co-chairs. Obviously, Mr. Paul Brandt is one of the chairs, and then the name eludes me on the second lady, certainly a lovely lady, Indigenous lady, that is the second co-chair. And I think the other thing that I would say that is unique about this is that they're engaging survivors. And so this is not a group of people or academics that are going to be providing advice or strategic advice or liaising with police services. You know, these are survivors of human trafficking who have such unique insight on how this crime is occurring, how these offenders are preying upon young people, and how these offenders are, to a certain extent, kind of getting away with what they are doing. So we're excited to continue the development of that. Very excited to continue that. If I recall, they've also issued about 3.5 million in grants. I'm looking at my deputy here. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, to various not-for-profit organizations throughout Alberta that again are doing absolutely just great work in supporting victims of human trafficking. And I think again, you know, I know my ADM alluded to this too. I mean, there's a foundation here of education, prevention, intervention, and again, using the eyes of those people who have been victims of human trafficking, I think is invaluable as we continue to establish this. I will just say one final thing in regards to this. My goal in regards to the Center to Combat Human Trafficking and the work that is being done.
Thank you, Minister. We'll head back over to the official opposition.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to start just by following up on a question that was asked earlier but not replied to. Through the Chair, may ADM Smith please identify where in Budget 2024 we can find information about the TLUs?
Thank you. It's in element 3.2 on page 180 of the government estimates. So custody operations element of the Correctional Services Division.
Thank you very much. My next question is in regards to crime in our urban centers and also across the province, frankly, that oftentimes they're crimes of opportunity associated with mental health, addiction to illegal drugs, and homelessness. How, through the Chair, how is the Minister funding and coordinating with other ministries to ensure people aren't discharged from corrections or remand into homelessness and right back into the environment and circumstances that had them incarcerated in the first place?
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. We're working very closely with mental health and addictions. In fact, when I was the former minister of that portfolio, this is about building that relationship, because that was, to your point, was my concern. We cannot just release folks into the cycle of abuse, the cycle of recidivism. So that was part of the reason of the creation of the therapeutic living units. To help people on a path to wellness.
But post-discharge, Minister, through the Chair.
Well, I mean, post-discharge. I mean, if are you talking about when the person is released, and then are you asking a question that is more appropriate for community and social services? Are you asking a question for mental health and addictions? Or are you saying specifically corrections? When correction has a release order on an individual and that person has been released by a judge, they are released. We, of course, try to make sure that we provide every option to them, but I'm not sure where you're going with that question.
Okay, no, I think you've answered it for me. Thank you. I'll move on. Through the Chair, I'd like to address the Auditor General's annual report from December 2023 that addresses a number of recommendations that were made to the Public Safety and Emergency Services Ministry. A number of these, if I may, I'll just briefly list them off. One is a recommendation to develop and approve a business plan with measurable desired results for the Victims of Crime and Public Safety Fund. Another is to implement a system to develop and maintain a provincial hazard assessment. And the third recommendation is to improve the monitoring and reporting of recommendations from post-incident disaster reviews. It's my understanding that these recommendations have not been fulfilled, and I'm curious to know what the delay is.
Well, the Auditor General's report is not a line item on the budget. Is there a specific line item you'd like to refer to?
Perhaps I can refer to my colleague for that information. Oh. I can't see time. You know,
Victim of Crime Fund is talked about.
the Victim of Crime Fund is talked about a number of times throughout the business plan, as is emergency services, of course, when it comes to appropriate planning for the year ahead.
Sure. The Deputy Minister would like to comment on this.
Sure, thank you very much for that question. So in terms of the recommendation related to the Victims of Crime Fund, you will note that that recommendation was made prior to the changes being made to the Victims of Crime Fund programming. So we continue to work with the Auditor General in terms of how that recommendation would be reflected in the current state of business. So we're continuing to work on that. In terms of the recommendation to conduct activities that will help the province be responsive to hazards. We are in the process of completing a hazard identification risk assessment process that is expected to be in place by the end of this summer, I believe. And then, of course, in a year's time, we will do an evaluation of that. And I'm sorry, the last one again was?
The recommendation to improve the monitoring and reporting of recommendations from post-incident disaster reviews.
Sure, and so we're obviously following up from the situation last year with a comprehensive post-incident assessment, as we do and have done with all large major emergencies in the past, and we will look forward to the findings of that in about a year's time.
Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing the results. Through the chair, I have a quick question in regards to, we're going to pivot quickly here to the capital plan in fiscal plan 2024-2027. On page 114, there is a total of $10 million earmarked for compassionate intervention implementation intake and assessment centers. For those who may not know, compassionate intervention is a term that is used to describe mandated or forced treatment for people with an addiction to illegal drugs. Through the chair, can the minister tell us today if his ministry will be responsible for overseeing all or a portion of this capital project that will force Albertans into treatment?
That's a question for mental health and addictions, Madam Chair.
Well, of course, when it's in the capital plan, there isn't that specificity, so I'll take that as a no. Thank you. I have another question then, moving right along, in regards to the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in our correction system and in the justice system writ large. The proportion of Indigenous persons, certainly between men, women, and youth, continues to tick upwards when it comes to their presence in prisons and remand and corrections. Can you specify what the ministry is doing specifically about this overrepresentation of Indigenous people in our justice systems?
So as you've probably seen very publicly, we work very closely with Treaty 6, and specifically Grand Chief Thomas, as well as our friends in Treaty 8 and Treaty 7. Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, this is a very complex problem. I can tell you what has not worked, and it's Bill C-75. Bill C-75 has been an abject disaster that has actually had the opposite effect to folks in our Indigenous friends and communities, and those are not my words. These are the words that are coming from the chiefs and the elders that I've spoken to. When somebody is charged, especially in the case of a domestic situation, and that person is released, unfortunately, they tend to go and seek some form of retribution on the person who's accused them. So, look, I mean, we are working with our friends in Treaty 6, 7, and 8. We are ensuring that we are providing mental health and addiction supports. This is why we're building 4 world-class recovery communities on Indigenous community lands. We're working with Indigenous communities in Treaty 8, and we are trying to stop the cycle of abuse. We are trying to stop recidivism. And quite frankly, the work we are doing, look, I'm going to say this as well. and I said this a couple of years ago, I will not be a government unlike successive governments, and I'm not pinpointing any specific government. I would just say there have been governments in the past, both provincially and federally, throughout the course of history that have failed our friends in the Indigenous communities, and I will not be a part of that, and this is why I am helping them establish their own police services. This is why I help them to get therapeutic living, recovery communities on their reserves. This is important to help them up with some of the challenges that they're facing right now.
Indeed, and through the chair, to your point that those issues have been amongst us and have been, plaguing communities for a very long time, long before Bill C-75 was ever on the table. Moving on, though, I'll try to sneak in one more question. Through the chair, I'm hoping the minister could provide some insight on the Calgary and Edmonton Public Safety and Community Response Task Forces. Both the Minister of Mental Health and Addiction and the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services sit on these task forces, and they single-handedly assigned people to sit around those tables. We haven't had an update on their work since December 2022. Madam Chair, though the government website reports that they are still active. The mandate for these task forces, per the budget, is to deploy an investment of $187 million of a commitment to address the issues of addiction, homelessness, and public safety. When can, through the chair, to the minister, when can the public, expect an update on the status of these two task forces, and how much funding have each of them allocated to date?
So, thank you. I mean, work was, look, we were facing some very exigent circumstances that time. As I've indicated in the past, we had people that were being stabbed in the streets. We had people that were unsafe using transit systems in both Calgary and Edmonton. There was the establishment of this committee, which was part of the intent to take immediate action. There was no intent to put out some sort of report, which is typical of governments, just to put out reports and then they may or may not be acted upon. This is part of...
Thank you, Minister. We'll move to the government side. Please proceed, member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services, as well as our Deputy Premier. I would like to start with sharing the conversations I have with First Nation in my role of Parliamentary Secretary to Indigenous Relations regarding our public safety and emergency services. We have First Nations reaching out, thanking our government, and specifically your department, the minister himself and his team, for the amazing work they've done with cleaning up encampments in the city, as well as comprehensive action plan in regards to investment into Indigenous policing programs. I have overwhelming support and phone calls from the chiefs and members of the community. They're very thankful that you're taking, deep dive into Indigenous policing in our province. They also were happy for our province government and your team exploring options instead of self-supply sites to build more rehab centers and mental health clinics in our province, which we need desperately here. So big thank you to the team. I have a question specifically to page 19 on the public safety and emergency services business plan. Objective to number 1.3 states that PSES, Public Safety and Emergency Services, will continue to improve the delivery of policing services in the province to ensure Albertans are safe and police are accountable to the communities that they are serving, including working with the Alberta sheriffs and further investment into the Indigenous policing programs. With that, I have a question on what are the benefits to the government of Alberta related to the increases in the funding for the Indigenous Police Services in the budget of 2024? And as well, why are governance bodies needed for the community tripartite? I apologize, my Ukrainian is coming through when I read this. Tripartite agreement, CTA communities.
Well, I think a lot to unpack there, member. Thank you very much. And through the chair, of course, additional 2.6 as part of budget 2023 approval, which began in 24-25 fiscal year for self-administered First Nation policing services to increase staffing levels through recruitment strategies and adding more officers. But I think it's also important, because you brought this up, look, the Indigenous Inuit Policing Program, and I've been very public about this, I've said this at federal, provincial, territorial meetings, is a discriminatory program. It is a program that those police officers, as we talk about Blood and Sutina and Lakeshore as an example, they get paid less. They get paid less. They don't get the same pensions. That is not right. That is not fair. I have advocated, I have a verbal commitment from this Liberal NDP government that we will not tolerate this discriminatory program. And I am hopeful, I guess, that they will treat First Nations policing as an essential service, which is really what it should be. That being said, we're continuing to work with my colleague in Ottawa, but none of this is easy. But that being said, I have made a commitment to Siksika Nation. I have made a commitment to other First Nations in this province, because it is about lifting them up. It is about empowering them. It is about going to them and saying, what do you want? How can I help you? As opposed to, again, the heavy hand of government, or we'll say, some folks that just want to impose a certain type of policing on them, as I've stated before, in what the overarching vision is, not an arm of the state, an extension and reflection of the community that we serve. So when we have somebody from Siksika or Tsuut'ina Nation, as an example, who is born and raised in the community, wants to police in the community, wants to be a leader in the community, the member previously asked, how do we stop this? Well, that's part of the way we stop this. We create leaders within the community. We empower people to be more than just to be more, quite frankly. So what we are doing is saying, rejecting the First Nations Indigenous Inuit policing program and saying, no, this needs to be an essential service where they get full funding, fair pay, where they get pensions equivalent to that of any other police service in this province. And that is what I have been fighting for. And so that when that person is born and raised in the community, policing that community, and I'll use Tsuut'ina as an example because that is the most one that is closest to Calgary as an example. I get it. When that person sits there and goes, hey, I can get $20,000 more going to police in Calgary, how does that help Tsuut'ina Nation? It doesn't. It doesn't help Tsuut'ina Nation. It won't help Enoch. It won't help Siksika. And they lose people. And who are they losing? They're losing leaders in their community. And we have to stop that. We have to stop that as well. So none of this is easy, but I can tell you right now, this is why I am absolutely committed to helping Siksika Nation, the first jurisdiction in 14 years to establish a police service. This is why I have a commitment to Enoch. I have a commitment to folks in Treaty 8, and quite frankly, any other First Nations that want to establish their own, whether it be police service or whatever is going to suit their community. We understand that some are really small, probably will not have a police service per se. However, I will say that something right now, I would say, is better than what they currently have. In some of these jurisdictions, they have none, and that's not right.
Thank you very much, Minister. And again, as a Parliamentary Secretary to Indigenous Relations, I do have a lot of conversation with the First Nations across the province. And the biggest and the most impressive feedback I've heard from the First Nation is that it's the first time in a long while that First Nations of Alberta felt that the government and your specific ministry is really listening, attending, and implementing new regulations to help our First Nations across the whole province. So with that, on page 117 of the Public Safety and Emergency Services Business Plan, key objective 1.1 states that PSES, in partnership with police services, municipalities, and Indigenous communities, will implement strategies to address crime and social disorder, particularly in urban centers and transit systems, which is also a big plague in our province right now. And thank you for addressing that already. So the question is, what public service, safety and emergency services grants are available for municipalities and Indigenous communities to support them in the implementation of strategies to address crime and social disorder in our province? And can you extend on the municipal police transition grant and what the grant money can be used for? How will this grant support Indigenous communities who are interested in exploring local and regional police models for their own communities? And the last question would be, has there been much uptake in Indigenous self-administered policing since the grant was initially available for them?
Well, obviously a lot to unpack in the next 20 some odd seconds, but this is why this one grant is the Indigenous, there's an Indigenous word in the police transition grant that we're talking about here, because it really is about supporting Indigenous communities and helping them up to say, what do you want? How can I help you? We also have other grants that are available, Alberta Crime Prevention Grant, pretty much any grant that is available.
Thank you, Minister. That's our time. We'll head back now over to the official opposition.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 4 or 5 questions left, so I will try to get them in. First one relates to Government Fiscal Plan 24-27, talks about significant investment in disaster preparedness, wildfires, water management, and also relates to Alberta Emergency Management line item 456. It's more a general question because the union representing people, wildfire people, they're essentially saying that wages are low, benefits are less, and contracts are unpredictable. That's why, I guess, that's what they're concerned about. That's the concern that many Albertans share, that Alberta will not be prepared once wildfire hits. So what do you have to say to those, Minister?
Well, I mean, member through the chair, of course, that is a question for forestry and parks. However, I let me just try to provide some context in regards to Alberta Emergency Management Agency itself. So I want you to think about a municipality that unfortunately is facing the crisis, and we use the crisis of a wildfire as an example. Alberta Emergency Management will then send out somebody to augment and support that municipality to ensure that they have all the resources. If that incident commander, who's typically your fire chief as an example, requires further resources, then they come in and try to get them the resources that they need. But that specific question that you're asking, I'm sorry, sir, it's more of a question for...
Thank you.
Yeah.
I can move on to the next question through the chair. Last year, day before the estimate, you announced that you will mandate body cameras for all police officers in the province. I was looking at all these documents. I don't find reference to that work. So through the chair, I just want to know where that project is at.
Yeah. So I'll get these guys to expand on that, but I'll tell you what I can tell you so far. Obviously, Calgary itself was, like Toronto, a bit ahead of the game and ahead of the curve on this, as they had already existing body-worn cameras. I can tell you the Edmonton Police Service has not done full implementation, but I think that they are in the process of going through that. They do have some that are deployed right now. Maybe Curtis can speak to a little bit more because his recency with the RCMP. But the RCMP, of course, they have started to roll that out in certain communities throughout Alberta. But Curtis, could you maybe expand on that a bit?
It's in progress, so I'm fine with
Yeah,
that.
sorry, it is in progress. Yeah.
Through the chair, I will move on to the next question. With respect to Victim of Crime Fund, what I need, just two numbers, how much directly will go to supporting victim of crime direct services and how much will go towards other initiatives, other safety initiatives.
Do you have it? So I'll commit to getting back to you with the answer to that question. You're looking for a number, is that correct, member?
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
okay,
you.
Thank you.
Also, victim of crime service organizations, the existing one, they are opposed to the changes, the four-zone model. And Minister, through the chair, you identified some gaps that many communities didn't have those services available to them. But also, the government of Alberta closed 7 victim-based service programs, such programs, without ever disclosing the reason why the closure occurred, and they never offered support to those 7 programs. So, Minister, will you agree that that was a mistake to close down those 7 programs, and that created gap in victim services?
Sorry, are you suggesting we created a gap in victim services through the chair, member?
Yes, by closing down those 7 programs.
Madam Chair, the point of order is under Standing Order 23B. The member speaks to matters other than the question under discussion. And Madam Chair, the matter is raised by the member is a matter of policy that is not an item on the ministry's estimates, fiscal plan, or business plan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Member Egan?
I think nothing can be.
So we'll have Member Egan speak to that.
I can
Or you, sorry.
It's not a point of order. Member is just wasting committee's time.
I think the minister would like to say something, so please proceed.
I want to answer his question, but
Sure.
you can finish your point of order.
We'll go to you. I think you were done, right? You were finished? You're speaking to the point of order?
Point of order, I said that it's just waste of committee's time because that victim services is part of this budget, this ministry. Member just didn't read before coming here.
So minister would like to make a comment, so let's go to the minister.
Not about the point of order. Are we good?
Yes.
The point of order is
So
now?
I
Okay,
would
so
find it not
I
to
just
be-
want to answer the member's question. Yeah, so I'm sorry, it wasn't, I got point of clarification from staff here. The boards failed. It wasn't, it had nothing to do with us closing anything down. The boards failed, and this is part of the redesign, is to ensure that boards don't fail in the future. And again, predictable, sustainable funding and consistency throughout the province. I would think that people would agree that's a good thing.
Thank you. One last question through the chair. I think I asked that pre-charge assessment system question, but you didn't get a chance to respond to it. It has its pros and cons, but the question I have for you as Minister, that how does it impact the independence of police work?
So, as I indicated, the pre-charge was more justice. However, ADM Zawacki does say that there is a bit of a connection there. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just speak in the context of pre-charge and how it connects to policing agencies across the province. In particular, my own experience formerly with the RCMP is that the pre-charge process really enhances the communication between Crown prosecutors and the police service. There have been gaps in the past, but what pre-charge does is really put some formality around that. So Crown reviews the cases, they get back to the police. If there's gaps or shortfalls, it results in creating efficiencies in the time of police, in the time for Crown prosecutors, and in court time as well too. So again, from the provincial police service perspective, I can say that it has been very well received.
Thank you to the chair. I think I'm specifically talking about its impact on the independence of police.
If I might respond, Madam Chair, it doesn't, in my assessment, it doesn't negatively impact that independence. That independence is very important. There always needs to be a strong working relationship between Crown prosecutors and police officers. And again, as I mentioned earlier, this enhances that communication. And again, there's no independence impact.
Thank you, and through the chair, one last clarification. So there is no budget set aside in this, there is no money set aside in this budget for Bill 11?
For Bill 11, no.
Thank you, I think.
That's it. No, we have a new clock, members, so please, the meeting is concluded, so we're going to continue on through lunch.
Start making them up.
So I will advise the committee that the time allotted for considerations of the main estimates has concluded, and I'd like to remind committee members that we're scheduled to meet on Monday, March 18th at 7 p.m. to consider the estimates for the Ministry of Justice. Thank you, everyone. This meeting is adjourned.